When Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne met at a studio bar, the moment that turned rivals into friends. Hollywood, 1952, two men, two legends, two completely different worlds about to collide in a dimly lit bar on the Warner Brothers lot. What happened that night would change everything anyone thought they knew about rivalry, respect, and the true meaning of friendship in a town built on illusions. Chapter 1. The afternoon sun hung low over Burbank, casting long shadows across the studio backlot. The temperature had climbed to 93 degrees, and the Santa Ana winds carried dust from the desert, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. Inside Stage 7, John Wayne had just finished a grueling 14-hour shoot for a Western that would later become one of the most celebrated films of the decade. He walked slowly toward his trailer, his boots leaving prints in the dust. His shirt clung to his back, soaked through with sweat. At 55 years old, his knees ached from hours of mounting and dismounting horses, and his throat was raw from shouting dialogue against the wind machines. But Wayne did not complain. He never complained. That was not who he was. His assistant approached with a towel and a glass of water. Wayne took both without a word, wiping his face and draining the glass in 3 long swallows. He handed them back and looked toward the commissary building in the distance. "I need a drink," he said. "Something stronger than water." The assistant nodded. "The bar on Lot 3 is open, sir. It's quiet this time of day." Wayne considered this. The bar on Lot 3 was known among the studio regulars as a place where serious men went to drink seriously. No autograph seekers, no gossip columnists, just wood paneling, dim lights, and bourbon that did not ask questions. He walked alone across the lot, past the facade of a frontier town, past the sound stages where other productions hummed with activity, past the wardrobe department where costumes from 100 films hung like ghosts of characters long forgotten. The bar was exactly as he remembered it. Dark, cool, a relief from the punishing heat outside. Wayne pushed through the door and let his eyes adjust to the dimness. The bartender, a man named Eddie who had been pouring drinks on this lot since the silent film era, looked up and nodded. "Mr. Wayne, the usual?" "Make it a double, Eddie." Wayne settled onto a stool at the far end of the bar, positioning himself so he could see the door. Old habits. He had learned long ago that a man should always know who was coming and going. Eddie placed the bourbon in front of him. Wayne lifted the glass, let the amber liquid catch what little light filtered through the blinds, then brought it to his lips. The door opened. Wayne did not look up immediately. He heard footsteps, measured, confident, the sound of a man who knew exactly who he was and did not need to prove it to anyone. Then he heard the voice. Eddie. Scotch. Neat. Wayne knew that voice. Everyone in Hollywood knew that voice, that distinctive rasp, that world-weary cadence that had defined a generation of film noir. He looked up. Humphrey Bogart stood at the other end of the bar, lighting a cigarette. He wore a rumpled sport coat over a white shirt open at the collar. His face was thinner than Wayne remembered from their last distant encounter at an industry function, and there were new lines around his eyes. Bogart glanced down the bar. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence stretched between them like a canyon. In Hollywood, everyone knew the story, or at least they thought they knew. John Wayne and Humphrey Bogart, two of the biggest names in the business, two men who had never worked together, never socialized, never exchanged more than perfunctory greetings at award ceremonies. The press had invented a rivalry. They always did. It sold papers. It filled column inches. Wayne was the symbol of American strength, the cowboy, the soldier, the man who won wars on screen with his fists and his honor. Bogart was the cynic, the detective, the man who walked through moral shadows and emerged with his dignity intact, but his illusions shattered. Different genres, different audiences, different versions of what American manhood could mean. But what the press did not know, what nobody outside these two men could understand, was that neither of them had ever spoken a single negative word about the other. Not in private, not to their closest friends, not even when journalists baited them with leading questions. The rivalry existed only in the imagination of people who needed heroes to be enemies. Bogart took his scotch from Eddie and walked slowly down the bar. He stopped 3 stools away from Wayne. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Wayne gestured to the empty stool. "It's a free country." Bogart sat. He took a long drag from his cigarette and let the smoke drift toward the ceiling. "Hot out there," he said. "Hotter than yesterday," Wayne agreed. Another silence. But this one was different. This one had texture, weight. Eddie moved to the far end of the bar, polishing glasses that were already clean. He had been in this business long enough to know when two men needed space. Bogart spoke first. "I saw your last picture," he said. "The one with Maureen." Wayne turned slightly on his stool. "Did you?" "3 times, Bogart said. "Betty made me take her twice. I went back alone the 3rd time." Wayne absorbed this. In Hollywood, a compliment disguised as casual conversation was as rare as rain in August. "I heard your new one is going to be something special," Wayne said. "The African picture." Bogart's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something in his eyes. Pride, perhaps, or exhaustion. The African Queen had nearly destroyed him. Months in the Congo, disease, equipment failures, a director who pushed everyone beyond their limits. "It almost finished me," Bogart admitted. "Katie, too. But when you see it—" He paused, tapping ash into a glass tray. "When you see it, you'll understand why we did it." Wayne nodded slowly. He understood. He understood completely. That was what real work felt like. That was what mattered. Not the awards or the newspaper articles or the size of your name on the marquee. The work itself. The willingness to push through pain and doubt and exhaustion until something true emerged on the other side. "I'd like to see it," Wayne said. "When it's ready." Bogart looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, Wayne saw past the screen persona, past the tough guy exterior, to the man underneath. "I'll arrange a screening," Bogart said. "Just the 2 of us, no studio people, no press." Wayne lifted his glass. Bogart lifted his. They drank together in silence. Outside, the Santa Ana winds continued to blow, and the shadows grew longer across the lot. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. These stories of forgotten moments between legends are becoming increasingly rare, and those who understand their value know they belong to a community that refuses to let true character fade into history. Chapter 2. The screening happened 3 weeks later. It was a Thursday evening, and the small projection room on the Paramount lot was empty, except for 2 chairs positioned in the center of the viewing area. Wayne arrived first, wearing slacks and a casual jacket. He had come directly from his home in Encino, telling his wife only that he had a business meeting. This was not entirely a lie. In Hollywood, everything was business, but this felt different. This felt like something else entirely. Bogart arrived 10 minutes later, accompanied by his wife, Lauren Bacall. She was not supposed to be there, but Bogart had insisted. "Betty knows everything," he explained to Wayne. "No secrets between us, never have been." Bacall extended her hand, and Wayne took it. Her grip was firm, her gaze direct. She was younger than both men by more than a decade, but there was nothing young about the intelligence in her eyes. "I've wanted to meet you for years," she said. "Bogey talks about you more than he admits." "Betty." Bogart's voice carried a warning, but his eyes were amused. Wayne smiled. "I hope the things he says aren't too unflattering." "On the contrary," Bacall said. "He says you're the only other actor in this town who understands what real work means." The projectionist signaled that the film was ready. The 3 of them settled into their chairs as the lights dimmed. The African Queen unspooled before them. Wayne watched without speaking for the entire running time. He watched Bogart transform into Charlie Allnut, the rough-edged boat captain with gin on his breath and reluctant courage in his heart. He watched Katharine Hepburn match him beat for beat, their chemistry crackling through every frame. When the film ended and the lights came up, Wayne did not move for a long moment. Finally, he turned to Bogart. "That's the best work you've ever done," he said. "Maybe the best work anyone's done." Bogart said nothing, but his jaw tightened, and he looked away toward the blank screen. Bacall reached over and took her husband's hand. "He knows," she said softly to Wayne. "He's known since we finished shooting. That's why it scares him." Wayne understood. When you gave everything to a role, when you left pieces of yourself in every scene, the vulnerability that followed was unlike anything else. The fear that what you had created might not be enough, the terror that it might be too much. "It doesn't scare me," Bogart said finally, his voice rough. "Nothing scares me." "Liar," Bacall said, but her voice was gentle. Bogart laughed. It was a short, sharp sound but genuine, and in that moment something shifted between the 3 of them. Wayne stood. He walked to where Bogart sat and extended his hand. "I was wrong about you," he said. Bogart looked up. "Wrong how? I thought you were just an actor. I thought the cynicism was who you really were." Bogart took Wayne's hand and stood. They were nearly the same height, 2 giants of the screen facing each other in an empty room. "What do you think now?" Bogart asked. Wayne held the handshake for a long moment. "I think you're the real thing," he said. "I think you've always been the real thing, and I think this town doesn't deserve either one of us." Bacall watched from her chair, saying nothing, but there was moisture in her eyes that she did not bother to hide. That night, the three of them went to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Burbank that Bogart knew. The owner seated them in a back room where they would not be disturbed. They talked for 4 hours. They talked about the early days, when Bogart was doing stage work in New York and Wayne was hauling props on the Fox lot for $3 a day. They talked about the roles that changed them, the directors who pushed them, the co-stars who lifted them up or dragged them down. They talked about fear, about failure, about the moments when walking away seemed easier than going on. And they talked about what mattered. Legacy, Bogart said, swirling the wine in his glass. That's the only thing that counts in the end. Not the money, not the fame. What you leave behind. Wayne nodded. My kids, my grandkids someday. I want them to look at what I did and understand something about who their father was, who their grandfather was. Not just the roles, Bacall added. The way you lived, the way you treated people. That's harder to see on screen, Wayne said. Maybe, Bogart replied, but people know. They always know. You can't hide who you really are. Not forever. The restaurant closed around them, and still they talked. The owner brought coffee and then brandy and then more coffee. He did not ask them to leave. In this town, you learn to recognize when something important was happening. When they finally stepped out into the cool night air, the streets were empty. Los Angeles at 3 a.m. A city of dreams, sleeping off its excesses. Bogart lit a cigarette and looked up at the stars visible through the gaps between buildings. This was good, he said. This was really good. Wayne clapped him on the shoulder. It's just the beginning. And somehow, both of them knew it was true. Chapter 3. The friendship that began that night in the studio bar grew steadily over the following months. There were more dinners, more late nights at Bogart's home in Holmby Hills, where the Rat Pack was beginning to take shape around him. Wayne was not a natural fit for the Rat Pack crowd. He did not drink as hard or stay out as late. His politics leaned in a different direction, and his public persona was built on a different kind of image. But Bogart did not care about any of that. The man's got more integrity in his little finger than half of Hollywood has in their whole bodies, he told Bacall one evening after Wayne had left. I don't care who he votes for. I care that when he says something, he means it. The two men began finding excuses to spend time together. A poker game here, a fishing trip there. Once, they drove down to Baja, Mexico together, just the two of them, and spent 3 days on a boat doing nothing but drinking beer and arguing about which of them had worked with the most difficult directors. Wayne won that argument, but only because he had more years in the business. Ford, he said, listing his grievances. Hawks, Walsh. Every single one of them thought they knew better than the actors what the actors should be feeling. At least your directors let you talk, Bogart countered. Houston made me do 37 takes of a single scene in Treasure of the Sierra Madre. 37. By the end, I didn't know if I was acting or just having a nervous breakdown. Maybe both, Wayne suggested. Definitely both. They laughed together under the Mexican sun, two men who had climbed to the top of their profession and discovered that the view from up there was lonelier than anyone had warned them. It was during this period that Wayne first noticed something was wrong. Bogart's cough had always been present, a constant companion from decades of cigarettes. But now it was different, deeper, more persistent. There were moments when he would stop mid-sentence, his hand pressed to his chest, his face tight with something that looked like pain. Wayne asked about it once. Doctor says I should cut back on the cigarettes, Bogart said dismissively. Doctors always say that. Maybe you should listen. Bogart looked at him with an expression that was half amusement, half defiance. Duke, the day I stop smoking is the day they put me in the ground. Some things are just part of who you are. Wayne did not press the issue. He understood pride. He understood the need to maintain your image, especially in a town that preyed on weakness. But he watched, and he worried. The cough grew worse through 1953 and into 1954. There were days when Bogart could not make it through a scene without stopping to catch his breath. The studio doctors gave him pills. The pills helped for a while. Then they stopped helping. It was during the filming of The Barefoot Contessa that Bogart finally admitted something was seriously wrong. He called Wayne late one night, his voice raspy over the phone. I need to talk to you, he said. In person, not over the phone. Wayne drove to Holmby Hills within the hour. Bogart was sitting in his study when Wayne arrived. The room was dark except for a single lamp on the desk. Bacall was upstairs asleep. Bogart had not wanted to wake her. Sit down, Bogart said. Wayne sat. For a long moment, Bogart said nothing. He stared at his hands, which trembled slightly on the arms of his chair. It's bad, he said finally. The doctors are using words I don't want to repeat, but the short version is that I'm running out of time. Wayne felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He had suspected, but suspecting and knowing were different things. How long? He asked. Bogart shrugged. A year, maybe 2 if I'm lucky, maybe less if I'm not. What about treatment? There's some things they can try, surgery, other procedures, but Bogey's not going to spend his last months in a hospital bed. Duke, that's not how I want to go out. Wayne leaned forward in his chair. Then how do you want to go out? Bogart looked up, and there was a fire in his eyes that Wayne had only seen before in his best performances. Working, Bogart said. I want to go out working, making pictures, being who I've always been. And I want the people I care about around me. Betty, the kids, and you, Duke. You're part of that now, whether you like it or not. Wayne felt his throat tighten. He was not a man who cried. He had built his entire life around not showing that kind of weakness. But this was different. This was his friend, telling him that their time together was measured in months, not years. Whatever you need, Wayne said, his voice steady despite everything. Whatever you need, I'm here. Bogart smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. I know, he said. That's why I called you first. They sat together in the darkness for a long time after that, not speaking, just being present with each other. 2 men who had spent their lives projecting strength, finally allowing themselves a moment of shared vulnerability. If you have ever lost someone you love, if you know what it means to watch time slip away from someone who matters, leave a comment right now with these words. True friendship has no expiration date. Say it out loud as you type it. Let the world know that some bonds are stronger than time itself. Chapter 4. The months that followed were some of the most difficult of John Wayne's life. He continued his own career, filming westerns and war pictures, maintaining the image that millions of fans expected. But between shoots, he spent every spare moment with the Bogart family. He was there for Sunday dinners, sitting at the table with Bogey, Betty, and their 2 young children, Stephen and Leslie. He watched Bogart try to pretend everything was normal, making jokes, telling stories, being the charming host he had always been. But Wayne saw the truth underneath. He saw how Bogart's clothes hung looser on his frame each week. He saw the way Bogart would excuse himself to cough in another room, not wanting the children to see. He saw the exhaustion that crept into Bogart's eyes even when his words remained sharp. Bacall was a revelation during this time. Wayne had always respected her as an actress, but now he saw her as something more. She was the rock that held everything together. She managed Bogart's schedule, dealt with the studio, shielded the children from the worst of it, all while maintaining her own career and her own sanity. How do you do it? Wayne asked her one afternoon, finding her alone in the garden while Bogart napped upstairs. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. You do it, because there's no other choice, she said. You do it, because he would do the same for you. You do it because love isn't just the good parts. It's the hard parts too, especially the hard parts. Wayne thought about his own marriages, his own failures, the women he had loved and lost because he had not understood what Bacall was telling him now. You're a better person than most, he said. Bacall shook her head. I'm just a woman who loves her husband. That's not special. That's what everyone should be. But Wayne knew better. He knew how rare this kind of love was. He knew how many people never found it, or found it, and let it slip away. Bogart continued working as long as he could. He filmed his final picture, The Harder They Fall, in the summer of 1955. Wayne visited the set 3 times during production, watching his friend pour everything he had left into the performance. The role was that of a washed-up sports writer exposing corruption in the boxing world. It was a cynical part, a perfect fit for Bogart's screen persona, but there were moments, captured on film forever, when something else showed through, a weariness that went beyond the character, a wisdom that came from knowing your own mortality. When the picture wrapped, there was a small celebration on the set. Champagne, speeches, the usual Hollywood rituals. Bogart stood in the middle of it all, accepting congratulations, shaking hands, but at one point he caught Wayne's eye across the room. The look they exchanged said everything words could not. This is it. This is the end of something. Wayne raised his glass in a private toast. Bogart nodded just slightly and turned back to the well-wishers surrounding him. The illness accelerated through the fall of 1955 and into 1956. Bogart underwent surgery in March, but it was too late. The disease had spread too far. Wayne visited the house in Holmby Hills as often as he could. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat together, watching old films on the television that Bogart had installed in his bedroom. Once, during a screening of Casablanca, Bogart turned to Wayne with a strange expression. "I never thought that picture would amount to anything," he said. "We all thought it was just another wartime melodrama. Nobody told us we were making history." "Maybe that's how it works," Wayne replied. "You never know which ones will last." "Which of yours will last?" Wayne considered the question. He had made over 100 pictures by that point. Some he was proud of. Some he preferred to forget. "Stagecoach," he said finally. "The Searchers, when it comes out. Maybe a few others." "The Searchers," Bogart repeated. "I heard it's going to be something special." "Ford thinks so, I'm not sure." I'm never sure until the audience tells me." Bogart laughed, which turned into a cough, which turned into a long, painful silence. "Sorry," he said when he could speak again. "The body doesn't cooperate like it used to." "Don't apologize," Wayne said. "Not to me. Never to me." Their eyes met, and Wayne saw the fear that Bogart worked so hard to hide from everyone else. The fear of the unknown, the fear of leaving, the fear of being forgotten. "You won't be forgotten," Wayne said, answering the question Bogart had not asked. "Not ever. I won't let them forget you." Bogart reached out and gripped Wayne's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me," he said. "I promise." It was a promise Wayne would keep for the rest of his life. Chapter 5, January 14th, 1957. Wayne was on location in Mexico when the call came. He had been expecting it for weeks. That did not make it easier. Humphrey Bogart had died that morning at 2:25 a.m., surrounded by his family. He was 57 years old. Wayne stood in the desert heat, the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the studio executive relay the details. His face showed nothing. His voice remained steady as he thanked the caller and hung up. Then he walked away from the set, past the crew members who did not yet know what had happened, past the cameras and lights and all the apparatus of illusion, until he found a place where he could be alone. He stood there for a long time looking at nothing. When he finally returned to the set, his director asked if everything was all right. "We've lost a good man today," Wayne said. "One of the best this business ever had." The director, who had worked with Bogart years earlier, understood immediately. He called a halt to production for the rest of the day. Wayne flew back to Los Angeles the next morning. The funeral was held on January 18th at All Saints Episcopal Church in Beverly Hills. It was a small service, as Bogart had requested. Only family and close friends. Wayne sat in the third row, his massive frame somehow diminished by grief. Bacall sat in the front, flanked by her children. She wore black, and her face was composed, but Wayne could see the effort it cost her. The eulogies were short and heartfelt. John Huston spoke about working with Bogart on The African Queen. Katharine Hepburn sent a message that was read aloud. Spencer Tracy, too ill to attend, had written something that made everyone in the church cry. When it was Wayne's turn to speak, he walked to the front of the church and stood for a moment, gathering himself. "Bogey and I came from different worlds," he began. "Different backgrounds, different politics, different ideas about almost everything." He paused, looking out at the faces of people who had loved the man they were burying. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that he was honest, he was loyal, and he was the best friend a man could ask for. Wayne's voice caught. He stopped, took a breath. "We spent the last few years talking about legacy, about what we leave behind. Bogey was worried that people would only remember the tough guy, the cynic, the hard-boiled detective in the trench coat." Wayne shook his head. "But that wasn't who he was. Not really. The real Bogey was the man who loved his wife more than anything in the world. The man who sat on the floor and played games with his children. The man who would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it, and then make a joke so you wouldn't feel embarrassed about accepting it." He looked directly at Bacall. "Betty, you gave him the best years of his life. He told me that. More than once. He said meeting you was the only thing he ever did that he never had any doubts about." Bacall nodded, tears streaming down her face. Wayne turned back to the congregation. "I made a promise to Bogey in his last months. I promised I wouldn't let people forget him, not the character. The man." He straightened his shoulders. "I intend to keep that promise. For as long as I'm around, I'll make sure people know who Humphrey Bogart really was. Not just a movie star, a good man, a great man, my friend." Wayne stepped down from the podium. As he walked back to his seat, Bacall reached out and caught his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Wayne squeezed her hand gently and sat down. The service concluded with a recording of Bogart's favorite song. Then the congregation filed out into the California sunshine, blinking in the brightness after the darkness of the church. Wayne stood on the steps, watching the mourners disperse. Frank Sinatra came over and stood beside him. "Hell of a thing," Sinatra said. "Hell of a thing," Wayne agreed. "You really going to keep that promise?" Wayne looked at the younger man. "Every promise I've ever made, I've kept," he said. This one won't be any different. Sinatra nodded slowly. Then I'll help you, he said. Whatever you need. We'll make sure the world remembers who he was. They shook hands there on the church steps, two men united by loss and by the determination to honor a friend who deserved to be remembered. Chapter 6. The years after Bogart's passing tested Wayne in ways he had not anticipated. He threw himself into his work with renewed intensity, making films that pushed him physically and emotionally. The Searchers was released to mixed reviews, but would eventually be recognized as one of the greatest westerns ever made. He won his first Academy Award nomination. He continued building his legacy, brick by brick, picture by picture, but through it all he kept his promise. He spoke about Bogart in every interview that allowed it. He attended tributes and retrospectives. He wrote letters to film historians, ensuring that the full story of Bogart's life and work was preserved. And he stayed close to the Bogart family. He watched Stephen and Leslie grow up. He was there for birthdays and graduations, and all the milestones that Bogart should have witnessed. He never tried to replace their father. He simply made sure they knew that their father's friendship had meant something, that the bond between two men could outlast mortality itself. Bacall eventually remarried to Jason Robards, and Wayne was happy for her. She deserved happiness after everything she had endured, but their friendship remained, a connection forged in the most difficult circumstances, tempered by time and maintained by mutual respect. In 1964, Wayne himself faced a health crisis, lung surgery. The same disease that had taken Bogart threatened to take him too. Bacall called him in the hospital. "You don't get to leave yet," she said, her voice fierce over the phone. "Bogey made me promise to look after you. I intend to keep that promise." Wayne laughed, which hurt, but he did not care. "You're as stubborn as your husband was," he said. "Where do you think I learned it?" Wayne survived the surgery. He survived the recovery. He went back to work because that was what men like him did. That was what Bogart would have expected. The final years of Wayne's career were marked by a new depth. Critics who had dismissed him as merely a cowboy star began to recognize the complexity beneath the surface. True Grit, released in 1969, finally earned him the Academy Award that had eluded him for decades. At the ceremony, standing at the podium with the golden statue in his hands, Wayne thought about Bogart. "If I had more time," he said in his acceptance speech, "I'd thank all the people who helped me get here." He paused, looking out at the audience. "But I want to take a moment to remember someone who isn't here tonight, someone who showed me what this business could be at its best. Humphrey Bogart was my friend. He taught me that being a movie star didn't matter if you couldn't also be a decent human being. I hope I've lived up to his example." The audience applauded. Many of them remembered Bogart. Many of them understood what Wayne was saying. And somewhere, Wayne liked to think, Bogart was watching and nodding his approval. The final chapter of this story belongs not just to Wayne or Bogart, but to all of us who understand what their friendship represents. In a town built on competition and jealousy, two men chose respect. In an industry that rewarded cynicism, they chose authenticity. In lives marked by public triumph and private struggle, they chose each other. Wayne continued to honor Bogart's memory until his own passing in 1979. By then, he had fulfilled his promise many times over. Bogart's legacy was secure. His films were studied in universities. His performances were held up as benchmarks of the craft. But more than that, people remembered the man. They remembered his integrity, his loyalty, his refusal to compromise on the things that mattered. And they remembered that he had a friend named John Wayne, who loved him enough to make sure the world never forgot. The bar on Lot 3 is gone now, replaced by a modern production facility. The Warner Brothers backlot where Wayne walked that sweltering afternoon in 1952 has been renovated beyond recognition. But the story remains. Two men, two legends, two completely different worlds that found common ground in the simplest of human needs, the need for connection, for understanding, for someone who sees you as you truly are. Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne were rivals only in the imagination of people who did not understand them. In truth, they were brothers, not by blood, but by something deeper, by choice. And that is the rarest kind of family there is. The photograph still exists somewhere in the archives. Two men sitting at a bar, glasses raised, captured in a moment of genuine connection. Their faces are relaxed. Their guards are down. They are just two people, sharing a drink, sharing their lives, sharing the burden of being who they were in a world that expected so much from them. The photograph has never been published. It sits in a box, in a storage facility, waiting to be discovered by someone who will understand its significance. But even without the photograph, the story survives. It survives in the films they made. It survives in the memories of those who knew them. And it survives in moments like this one, when we take the time to remember that behind every legend, there is a human being, flawed, vulnerable, searching for connection just like the rest of us. When Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne met at that studio bar in 1952, they had no idea what would follow. They were just two tired men looking for a drink at the end of a long day. But fate had other plans, and sometimes fate gets it right. If you watch this far, it is because you understand what this story is really about. It is not about Hollywood. It is not about fame or fortune or the movie business. It is about friendship, real friendship, the kind that survives distance and difference and even death. Leave a comment right now saying, "I watched this far," so I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories on this channel. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your own life, if it made you think about the friendships that matter most, then please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. We tell stories here, not just any stories, stories about character, about integrity, about what it means to be a good person in a world that does not always reward goodness. These are the stories that Hollywood has forgotten, but we remember, and as long as there are people like you, people who watch until the end, people who understand what really matters, these stories will never fade away. They do not make friendships like theirs anymore, but maybe, just maybe, if we remember their example, we can try. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about the things that matter. Until next time.